This is the Fix Your Sciatica podcast.
So what happens when you're overstimulated? Every sensation gets more intense, the sounds around you get louder, the lights get brighter, and even worse, the pain that you're in actually gets more intense. And unfortunately, the pain and stress response actually interact with each other, meaning that the more pain that you're in is going to lead to the more stress you're going to be experiencing, which then further intensifies your pain, which then worsens your stress. And not to mention the other daily stresses that we go through on a daily basis. So how can we break that cycle? Meditation. What if we're too frazzled to actually even sit down to meditate? What are the other options for us to calm down just a little bit? And don't you just hate it when someone tells you to actually calm down and it's actually the exact opposite effect on you? You actually get more irritated. In today's mini episode, we're actually going to be talking about exactly that. What can we do to turn down all of the stressful noise in our minds, bodies, and souls when we are especially dealing with sciatica pain? And the good news is that this episode is actually not just limited to sciatica pain, but this is actually going to be covering all other body parts as well. So if you have a friend who's actually dealing with some sort of pain that is tied to their stress, go ahead and pause and send this episode on over to them. Now, I've recorded an episode about sleep and my recommendations for optimal sleep when dealing with pain about a month ago. And today is actually going to be talking all about stress management, but what about some true practical strategies to actually follow and address your stress right now? Before we get into it, we actually need to talk about what stress is and actually how it's related to pain. So, first question. What is stress? It is actually anything that causes a challenge or change in our emotional, mental, physical, or spiritual life. Is stress bad? That's another question. And a lot of times people are saying that stress is bad. And in fact, stress is absolutely not a bad thing. And in fact, we actually need stress to facilitate a change in our life, in our being. However, when we receive too much stress and don't have enough time to recover and adapt from it, this is actually when we start to face exhaustion and we go down the chronic stress and pain rabbit hole. Typically, when we encounter stress, our sympathetic nervous system actually kicks in, and this is called fight or flight. Our adrenal glands, which sits right above our kidneys, will actually release adrenaline that actually increases our heart rate and releases cortisol to actually help divert energy to our muscles and brain so that we can either fight the animal in front of us or run away. And as we've evolved as a society from fighting wild animals, we are now living sedentary lives where the same stressful chemicals get released when someone cuts us off the road or when we're trying to calm down a crying child in the middle of a grocery store. And the same hormones actually get released when we pull our backs or when the sciatic nerve gets irritated because of any one of the triggers that we know cause our pain. And the sympathetic system is actually there to protect us from danger, to protect us from an injured body part, to run or fight from a predator, to protect ourselves. The sympathetic nervous system is needed for us to rise to the occasion, and it is not a bad thing. However, we do need to actually have the proper balance to get into the parasympathetic state as well. And this is what we call our rest digest state. And this is where our heart rates slow down a little bit more, the blood travels more so to our vital organs, and we can really focus on rebuilding anything that is broken and actually rest. Most of the time, people think rest is just sitting around and sleeping, but there's going to be a lot more to it. And in fact, we actually need to let our nervous system and physiological processes recover from the stresses that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. And that includes proper digestion, the ability to tap into the parasympathetic state, and then also being able to recover day in and day out. Now, as I have stated earlier, the sympathetic state is not a bad thing. Stress is not a bad thing. However, if we don't have time to recover in between bouts of stress because we're going through too much physical or mental exertion, we don't have any of the time to restore our energy and heal our tissues. And so, why is this reality so important to pain recovery? Now, research has actually shown that chronic stress overload or the elevated increase in stress over time can actually intensify pain, and the effect happens vice versa. And so the link for that specific article will actually be found into the show notes. And it is important to rest, but rest does not mean having to lay there like a blob. Quite the contrary, we do have opportunities to tie in active motions into our daily lives that will help us transition into the parasympathetic state. Yes, you can do yoga and meditation, but let's actually get into some key actionable things that can take little to no effort, just a little bit more focus. The first action step for you is going to be breathing. Now, not just any breathing, but take a deep 4-second inhale and then hold for 4 seconds. Now, pay in mind that you're going to do a 4-second inhale through your nostrils, hold it for 4 seconds, then breathe out slowly out of your mouth for 4 seconds, and then hold your breath for 4 seconds. You're going to be repeating this as needed, and you're going to focus on this pattern just for a few minutes. You're going to notice that your shoulders are no longer up by your ears and your heart rate is going to be slowing down. And this activity is even more fun if you are wearing a heart monitor because you're going to be able to keep track of your heart rate. And I'll tell a little bit more about heart rate tracking in future episodes, and I've also talked about it in the previous episode before. The second action step is to actually just go for a walk. Now, out here in the United States, we're approaching the spring, and the weather is hopefully going to be a little bit more favorable for most of you. Simply getting fresh air and going for a leisurely walk is going to be really helpful. Now, if you can barely walk, try riding a stationary bike, either sitting more upright or sitting in the recumbent bike. It could be helpful for you. Again, nothing super intense. We're actually going to be just getting the work done rather than focusing on the intensity. And we're going to be moving a lot slower and less intense than you often think. If you're into objective numbers, we're looking at trying to get into what is called zone 2 of your heart rate zone, which is about 60 to 70% of your heart rate max and no higher. But don't beat yourself up if you can only tolerate the zone 1 activity for now. Try to strive for about 5 minutes a day and increase about a minute each time you do this if you can. Another way to think about how you can gauge zone 2 is that you go from just the breathing rate that you are when you're just sitting, and then having that breath rate slightly increase, meaning that you're taking in a little bit more oxygen, breathing out a lot more CO2. The third action step is to actually listen to some, as silly as it may seem, hand-pan music. And I know, hear me out, I used to think this stuff used to be so crunchy granola, but if you type in hand-pan music and healing, you're going to find some beautiful music with healing frequencies. And I'm going to go into sound therapy and healing frequencies in a later podcast, but go ahead and try to search for that and listen to it while sitting, breathing, or going on your walk. The fourth action step is actually going to be journaling. Take what is going on in your head and put it on paper, type it, or anything else. You actually need to have an outlet for the stress that is actually happening in your head and mind. Use this as a way to release your stress, frustrations, and anger, and you're going to notice that your head and your soul will actually feel lighter as a result. Sometimes we need some external aids to help with recovery and tapping into the parasympathetic state. For me, I find that low-grade vibrations can actually help me get into a state pretty frequently, especially when I'm trying to wind down in the evening. And I personally use the Apollo Stress Relief Wearable. And the big question is, what is Apollo Neuro? It is a small band the size of a wristwatch that you can actually wear on your skin to stimulate your nervous system. So if you need a little bit of a nervous system pick-me-up, you can choose a specific setting that will help wake you up. But in most of our cases, we actually need more of a focused way to calm down from the stresses that we encounter on a day-to-day basis. I simply wear this strap every night and turn on relaxation mode, which gets my entire body and my mind ready to rest. It also syncs up with your phone so you can customize your desired changes, and Also, you can even pair it with any of other designated stress relief strategies. And I find that this is a fantastic way to calm down and relieve stress so that I can focus on recovery. And what's really cool is the fact that it's really easy to use, it's not super cumbersome, and the results actually happen within a few days. Oftentimes, we're told that we need to do more to get better. But the question is, what if we did less? What if we focused more so on true recovery? Being able to tap into the parasympathetic nervous system to allow our bodies to heal from all of our physical and mental stress and trauma is going to be a huge step to pain relief. And as you know, when your stress reduces, your pain will also reduce as well, and a reduction in stress begets a reduction in pain. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about the Apollo Neuro wearable, you can actually check out my affiliate link in the show notes.
Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you got some help from today's podcast. And for more info, check us out at ifixyoursciatica.com. Have a fantastic and pain-free day. No patient-therapist relationship is formed by listening to this podcast. We are not providing medical advice, and all information should be confirmed by a medical provider.